Hi gangers, the power structure of Necromunda is quite a complex one, teeming with gangs, houses and factions all fighting for a slice of the industry and archaeotech the planet produces. So many factions in fact that it can be quite difficult to know what your options are when you're starting to play the game. So in this video I'm going to go through all the playable factions in the game and the basics of their extremely in-depth lore so you can decide which to pledge your allegiance to. And if you'd like to catch up with our book club episodes, you can find them over on the second channel, Arbitorian's Precinct House, link in the thing below. The hive world of Necromunda is a teeming metropolis of imperial industry. Its hives, separated by ancient and polluted ash wastes, are broken down into layer upon layer of industry and intrigue, each controlled by a dizzying array of houses, guilds and factions, and almost all of these send their foot soldiers into the hell that is the Underhive, the lawless underbelly of the hives themselves, where all these industrial giants and ancient cartels fight proxy wars that would be pretty illegal in the hive above. It's one of the most detailed and minutely examined settings in the whole of Warhammer 40,000. In fact, there are so many factions competing for influence that it can be really hard to tell what your options are when setting up your own gangs. So in this video, I'm going to go through all that, give you a basic intro to their lore and their goals, and then broadly how they are taken and used in the game. But first, some housekeeping. Necromunda can be quite a confusing game, and there are lots of different ways it represents these factions. In Necromunda, there are broadly three types of playable faction. The gangs are full playable factions with their own units, weapons, and rules. Generally, you're always playing a gang, even if it's like a weird one that stretches the use of that term, like an enforcer precinct or an ash waste nomad raiding party. Gangs are then able to make alliances with various other powerful factions, from the nobility to the merchant guilds, and these alliances might give you extra delegations you can add to your gang. So while these are playable factions, they're not playable on their own. You add them into an existing gang. And then finally, there are a ton of individuals running around, from the hangers-on that gangs take on for specialist services like doctors or lookouts, to hired guns paid to provide muscle, to the various known characters and personalities famed across the Underhive. And there's a fair amount of grey area in the middle as to which of those counts as which, but generally, I am not including the individuals in this, just the main factions and all the ally factions that you can add into your gang on the tabletop. In each of these cases, I'll go through who the faction are and then briefly explain which of those categories they fall into. Okay, on with the lore. The many hives of Necromunda are extremely hierarchical, literally so. At the top of each is the region known as the Spire, where the noble houses of the planet rule in unimaginable luxury, dominated by the Imperial House of Helmawr, the Imperial governors of the planet. The houses rarely leave the Spire. Instead, they send agents down hive to take care of any business the nobles would rather not sully their hands with. Below this level is the hive city proper, the residence of the majority of the population, and where most of the citizens of Necromunda toil in factorums and foundries and live out their meagre lives, producing the goods that the planet exports to the rest of the Imperium. Life in the hives is monotonous and dreary. Any breach of the peace or drop in production is considered a crime against the Imperial House, and while the majority of the populace live and die there, there are plenty who seek to escape for a wilder life. The target for that escape is often the Underhive. This is the usual setting for games of Necromunda. The Underhive is a frontier region, the oldest and most decrepit part of the hive, its collapsing domes straining under the weight of the hive above. With no mass industry of its own, it's thinly populated with ne'er-do-wells, settlers, green hivers and outcasts, the wild west of the hives. A dangerous place, but one that can offer the chance at a new life, or maybe just enough ill-gotten gains to enjoy oneself a bit more than in Hive City. It's not completely lawless, but it's very close, and life in many of its settlements is dominated by the gangs. Gangs of escapees, convicts, people who need to lie low, but mostly gangs sponsored by the clans and houses of Up-Hive, sent there in search of treasure or to attack the secret holdings of their rivals. Finally, as the collapsed domes go deeper and deeper, one reaches either the sump, the lake of toxic runoff filtered down from the upper levels, or the hive edge itself and the ash wastes. And the wastes have their own occupants. Mining delegations, trade caravans guarded by grizzled road gangs, and native populations all haunt the ash storms, making them just as dangerous as Hive Bottom. And you can play factions from any of those places. So let's start with the most numerous, the clans of Hive City. The clan houses are the beating heart of Necromunda, controlling the vast majority of the population of the planet. Their people, known as Hivers, live in the main layers of the hive and toil in the industries and factorums of their house, mining raw materials or manufacturing the finished goods that the planet exports. Clan houses jealously guard their territory, industries, technologies, and populations from each other. House territory in a hive is off limits to other houses, and the different houses don't mix that much. They function a lot like nations on other worlds. There are hundreds of clan houses, but Necromundan society is dominated by 6. The houses Orlok, Goliath, Escher, Delak, Cawdor, and Van Sar, all of which have a significant presence in every hive on the planet. Each of these houses controls specific industries, and each of these needs to trade with each other for certain materials, but none are allowed to trade off-world. That's the domain of the noble houses. All are also bound by the Pax Helmawr, which prohibits outright war between houses as it damages production. That means that the vast majority of industrial sabotage, political assassinations, and general conflict that goes on anyway is instead done by gangs. Gangs of the clan houses are effectively paramilitary wings of their house, illicitly armed and funded by the house as a whole, and charged with keeping order in house territories, protecting the honor of the house, controlling and seizing assets, or secretly sabotaging their rivals. The members of those gangs are both renegades and chancers out for their own gain, and also deniable foot soldiers in the constant proxy war the houses wage. And because of the illegality of doing that in Hive City, those battles are often fought in the forgotten areas, the dead zones, ash wastes, and of course the Underhive. House gangs are the most common playable factions in the game, each house having its own specialities, weapons, fighters, brutes, prospects, and even pets. House Orlok is known as the House of Iron, as it controls the slag heaps and mines dotted across the surface of the planet. Its domains in Hive City are full of refineries and furnaces, the vast majority of its citizens confined to a life as drudges, menial workers who work on the lines. The only way out of this life is to prove your loyalty to one of the house's controlling families and join one of their gangs. Gang culture is central to Orlok life in a way that it isn't to a lot of the houses. The gangs work for the controlling families as enforcers, foot soldiers, and minders, and make sure that the produce from the mines out in the wastes makes its way safely to the hives. Orlok's reputation relies on its road gangs, whose convoys crisscross the wastes and whose members man checkpoints on the most valuable routes. Despite the constant manoeuvring between its main families, the strongest of which is Orlok itself, the house remains incredibly tight-knit and unified against outsiders, and its gangs are noted for their strong bonds and sense of brotherhood, as well as the very reliable auto weapons the house manufactures in great numbers. Despite a strong rivalry with House Delak, who recently acquired the Ulanti contract, Orlok tend to stay relatively neutral in hive matters. House Goliath, the House of Chains, are one of the newer houses and operate in the foundries, forges, and furnaces of Necromunda. Colossal brutes, Goliaths are the product of a long-dead genetic program to try and create the hardiest workers on the planet. Most Goliaths are vat-born, bred like cattle, and living short and brutal lives fueled by cocktails of stims and growth drugs. To House Goliath, size and strength are the only things that matter, and they see the rest of the houses as weak and pathetic. The other houses, in turn, viewing them as barbarians and brutes, unhinged maniacs, liable to overload at any moment. Goliath gangs are distinctive. Their armour and clothing derive from the industrial workwear of the forge, and their weapons often vastly over-engineered tools and stubbers that gangers from other houses would struggle to even lift. Despite their arrogance, Goliath are dependent on trade with Orlok for the ore that feeds their foundries, and with House Escher for the drugs that keep their society functioning. Ironically, they also despise Escher as the weakest of all the houses. House Escher, of course, return the sentiment. Escher is the House of Blades, an ancient and very wealthy house whose history stretches back to the founding of Necromunda and whose coffers rest on the back of its vast chem empire. Escher's laboratories manufacture the vast quantities of chemicals the planet requires to function, from the simple industrial solvents required by its industries to the growth hormones of the Goliath to the refined Juvenat serums favoured in the Spire. This has made them powerful and wealthy, but it hasn't always been good. A few millennia ago, the house started suffering from a genetic disease that eventually ruined the male side of the clan. Escher men are withered and stunted, pitied and hidden by the rest of the house, and the house adapted to this, becoming fiercely matriarchal. Escher gangs are made up entirely of women, and since service in the gangs is considered a rite of passage for young Eschers, they have a reputation for not only speed, but recklessness. Escher gangs also make use of gene-bred and off-world beasts that the house import in large numbers for use in the chem industry. Their blades are often coated in lethal poisons that they derive from them. Van Saar are known as the House of Artifice and are one of the more isolationist houses for a good reason. Van Saar are known for the fine quality and advanced nature of their technological goods. Their artificiers and armourers make the finest weapons seen on Necromunda. The house reveres technical knowledge, and its families, who operate a strict feudal structure, guard their secrets jealously. Van Saar are known across Necromunda as serious, dour people, professional and humorless, but their standoffishness conceals quite a dark secret. The house is actually built on a fragmented and ancient STC database, a secret kept very close since to lose it would cost them both their status and their rights on the planet. The position of a Van Saar's family and the depths of their knowledge is tied directly to how much access their family has to the STC, but there's also a catch. The radiation leaking from the ancient machine has withered and wizened the members of the house, and of course, those families who have the most access are the most affected. The house as a whole has the smallest population and relies on a cocktail of chemicals traded from the Escher to preserve their lifespans. House Cawdor is the largest of the houses and very much the opposite of Van Saar. Cawdor is the pauper house. Its domains the refuse and waste of the Hives, and its empire built upon the discarded scraps of the other clans. Cawdor recycle and reuse the many waste products of Necromunda, its teeming billions picking through the spoil for meagre riches. The people of Cawdor are the poorest in the city, a poverty that has been alleviated by the opiate of religion. Cawdor is known as the House of the Redemption, a technically illegal cult of the Emperor that started on Necromunda before spreading off-world. Redemptionists are hardliners who believe that the human race has fallen from the path of the Emperor and is drowning in its own sins, and that only by flagellation and the burning of sinners can it be redeemed. Cawdor as a house have embraced this. Their people cover their faces with crude masks and hoods and hide the zealots of the redemption whenever they can. For them, the hope offered by the Redemptionist creed is their only salvation. Cawdor gangs tend to be large, filthy and badly equipped. Their fighters constructing themselves crude polearms with guns strapped onto them at the top, in desperate imitation of the God Emperor's guardians who they might have seen in a picture once. And most Cawdor gangs walk a very fine line between being considered law-abiding or outlaw, given how close they cleave to an illegal cult. Cawdor gangs often also include zealots of the redemption, but one that tips over the edge into becoming a redemptionist gang will soon be hounded out of settlements and prosecuted by the authorities. Delac is the most sinister of houses, known as the House of Shadow, another house with secrets to hide. Delac are an enigma. Their industry is mostly based around the control and selling of information and the illicit trade in Ghast, an illegal psychically active drug manufactured on Necromunda in which the noble houses have considerable interest in. Delac territories are unmarked and considered haunted by other hivers, scared that the house's shadowy agents might be watching them. And its people are strange and otherworldly. While many indentured hivers work in the laboratories and factories of the house's true agents, those actually referred to as the Delac, seem to be uniformly hairless and sensitive to bright light and wrap themselves in long trench coats to stay hidden from outsiders. The truth, of course, is even stranger. The true Delac are united by a low-level psychic hive mind known as the Psychoterica. No one knows how this originated, possibly from their long exposure to Ghast and its related industries, but the oldest Delac claim a connection to the strange Piscean Xenos that once inhabited the planet's deep underground oceans and might still be there to this day. The gangs of the house are certainly known to use a number of strange tentacle beasts dredged up from the depths. Whatever its source, the Psychoterica bonds the members of the house, giving them a strange sense of unity, a limited form of psychic understanding and communication, and allows them to recognize one another and sense each other's place in the hierarchy of the house. as well as filling their minds with ancient memories of their fishy origins. Delac gangs have been involved in many of the grand conspiracies of the planet, the ruling house's declarations often backed by shadowy figures removing problematic rivals with a knife in the dark. In fact, it could be said that Delac are often on the side of Necromunda itself. While the 6 clan houses have control of the vast majority of Necromunda's citizens, its trade and its government is the responsibility of the great houses, or noble houses. Wealthy beyond imagining, the scions of the noble houses reside in the Spire, the highest and most luxurious part of the Hive, and control all off-world trade, forming pacts with the clan houses to supply their enterprises, and then negotiating shipping rights, landing schedules, and tithe contracts with imperial agencies. While the nobles of the Spire would not usually dream of themselves with open conflict, the competition for contracts and status can be just as deadly as in Hive City, and the noble houses regularly contract the services of the clan gangs or deploy their own detachments of expertly trained killers into the Underhive to influence things in their favour. Noble houses generally can't be chosen as a gang in Necromunda, instead they are ally factions. Gangs can make alliances with any of the noble houses in order to receive one of their delegations, and each gang has a noble house that it's particularly friendly with. House Yulanti is the oldest of all the great houses and often the chief rival of the Imperial House. Yulanti are fabulously wealthy, their businesses operating in every field, though their great wealth is mostly derived from the planet's drug trade. Yulanti is seen as absurdly decadent within the Spire, their mansions and palaces the most richly decorated, and their scions living in incredible luxury, and the house knows how to use this wealth to further its own ends. As well as a standing alliance with the House of Escher, who supply much of its off-world trade, Yulanti are known to dispatch courtiers across the Hive, even down Hive, to remind gangs of exactly who their patrons are. House Koion is another ancient house who have retained their power and prominence through a long association with the ecclesiarchy. A matriarchal house, the daughters of Koion are common recruits to the Adeptus Sororitas, and its nobles hold many positions within the religious institutions of the planet. As you might expect, the house are illicit sponsors of House Cawdor, though the pious nobility of Koion would never directly associate with the Zealots of the Redemption, they do find them a useful source of faithful soldiers for their schemes and plots. When dealing with those lower down the Hive, Koion send out Ministorum delegations, a single prima materis, an agent of the house, wrapped in the trappings of the faith, accompanied by grim fraterist bodyguards raised from the masses. House Grime proclaims itself the preeminent military family of Necromunda, and its holdings include the planet's weapons manufacture and trade, and the right of inspection and appointment to the Ash Militias, Necromunda's planetary defence forces. Many military officers owe House Grime for their positions, and its members habitually dress in glittering dress uniforms, marching through the Spire like they're waging war, despite very few of its scions really ever having fought one. Nevertheless, the puffed-up nobles of Grime, keen to maintain their image, often send lower-ranked family members into the Hive or even the Underhive to gain military experience, serving as military attaches to the gangs, protected by loyal Jaegerkin. House Ranlo are the guardians of Necromunda's coffers, with considerable links to the Merchants Guild. Ranlo are austere and serious, despised by many of the other houses, though they have a long-standing arrangement with House Orlok, whose road gangs allow the commerce of Necromunda to flow. Ranlo are known for auditing conclaves, who travel through the Hives, assessing taxes and making sure debtors are apprehended. House Tai are one of the youngest of the noble houses, apparently tracing its customs back to the ancient Terran empire of Nihon, though no one quite knows if that's true or an affectation. Tai deals in espionage information, as well as maintaining strong links to the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Many of the planet's astropaths are provided by House Tai, and the noble house maintains strong connections to House Delac to continue that trade. Tai is known for its Onmyodo covens that consist of one Psyker and one Null, and whose services are sold to various houses and gangs for the purposes of divination and telepathic communication. And finally, of the big houses, House Catalysts are known as the House of Masks and are the deal makers and social overseers of Necromunda. Catalysts cultivates bonds with many different off-world enterprises, acting as middlemen for the rest of the houses and bringing valuable trade to the planet. Strangely though, for a house so socially adept, the faces of these deal makers are covered at all times. Scions of Catalysts are never seen without their masks, believing that outside their home spires, it's safest for a nobleman to never never exist at all, or to be an unknown to any potential assassins. They have a long-standing alliance with House Van Saar, though no one's really sure why, and jealously guard Van Saar's secrets and interests. Anyone who has learned too much might be visited by a House Catalyst Carnival, an extravagantly armed group of killers dispatched to deliver a bloody and violent warning to any who cross them. There are, of course, a number of smaller houses and even more fallen houses who fell prey to the machinations of the Spire. Rebel lords and rogue nobles can be found littering the Underhive. But it's worth mentioning by name just one more, House Aranthus. Aranthus were a noble house of Necromunda and rivals to the Helmawrs, who were all but wiped out by a mysterious plague in M40. However, while the house were thought to have been destroyed, they were in fact in hiding. Using pre-imperial technology left over from the ancient Iron Lords, who ruled Necromunda before the Imperium, the house slumbered below the ash wastes, eventually returning to prominence shortly after the emergence of the Great Rift. Led by the terrifyingly powerful Ozostium Aranthus, the house allied with Yulanti to enact a coup, briefly becoming the new lords of the planet before, with the threat of the Imperium looming, Helmawr regained control. House Aranthus are now in exile in Hive Minerva, building their forces and waking more of their ancient kind in secret before they have another go. Ruling above all the houses, noble and clan alike, and still the official rulers of the planet, is of course the Imperial House of Helmawr, overseen by the planetary governor of Necromunda, Gerontius Helmawr. House Helmawr has been in control of Necromunda for millennia and is adept at playing off the various noble houses against each other to avoid disruption or coup, something that mostly works with some recent exceptions. However, they have the weight of tradition on their side and the support of the Imperium. To the Imperium as a whole, the House of Helmawr are Necromunda, and are fully responsible for any of the planet's tithe obligations. The Imperial House has a number of ways it exerts its control on the planet, but the only one that includes actual members of the house itself are the Spire Hunter raiding parties that frequently depart from the Spire. Spire Hunters, or Spirers, are figures of horror to the inhabitants of areas like the Underhive. Boogeymen and fiends who lurk in the darkness, preying on innocent hivers, a tale told to scare small children, and a rare and gruesome threat if ever actually encountered. But Spirers are not the ghosts of the myths. Spirers are in fact the sons and daughters of the noble houses, sent down Hive as something of a rite of passage to prove themselves tough and resourceful enough to take their place in the family. The sadistic scions of the nobility make their sport with the help of hunting rigs, customised war suits that contain everything needed to turn their entitled inhabitant into a stalking horror. This isn't something every noble does. Wearing a rig requires considerable body modification, from the implanting of neural ports to, in some cases, the removal and reshaping of limbs, and the rigs themselves are ludicrously expensive, often custom built by the finest weaponsmiths in the Spire, and rumoured occasionally to contain illicit Xenos components. While there is evidence of other noble houses sending their youth out as hunters, the activity is dominated by House Helmawr. Spire hunters usually act alone, the rig able to keep their occupant alive for weeks, slowly allowing more sophisticated access to its systems as the young noble becomes more skilled, but sometimes a hunting party will be formed of multiple Spirers, clad in diverse sorts of rig whose abilities complement each other, and tasked with slaughtering a specific number of hivers or spreading terror before they're allowed to return back to the Spire. Spire hunters are a playable gang, though not a very big one. Spirers are not the main way in which the Imperial House retains control of the planet, though, more of a distraction. The real strength of Helmawr is the Pax Helmawr, the law of Necromunda. The ruling house controls the vast armies of Palanite enforcers. Enforcers are keepers of law and order, with order absolutely taking precedence there, with two overriding doctrines that dictate their actions. First, to ensure production continues, and secondly, to protect the noble houses. Armies of enforcers are stationed across the planet, including in military fortifications such as the Dust Wall, and their precincts can be found across the Hives, where their brutal suppression of dissent ensures the continued dominance of the Imperial House. Enforcers are given extremely wide latitudes, especially in more remote areas like the Underhive, and in reality might function as little more than another gang, with corruption and casual brutality rife and accepted as long as order's maintained. Enforcer patrols have considerable considerable resources to call on, from heavy body armour and crowd suppression weapons, up-armoured subjugator elites, to fleets of vehicles, though not all precincts are equally as well supplied. In the very worst areas of the Hive, the bad zones, enforcer patrols are known to go rogue, forming their own petty crime empires and attempting to maintain dominance over the local gangs at any cost. Above the Palonite enforcers lay the Palonite Justicars. The Justicars are an elite that police the ranks, titles and hierarchy of the noble houses. Their magistrates ensure succession and inheritance, including the succession of the planet, and rather than the Provost Marshal, the Justicars take their orders directly from the Imperial Governor alone, acting as an ultimate legal authority. Justicar delegations also regularly travel down Hive on the hunt for either rogue nobles or those that claim to be someone they're not. Claiming membership of a noble house is considered a very serious crime in Necromunda, even if you're just doing it in the bars of the Underhive. Justicars are liable to set up courts in any settlement, factorum or township they wish, judging and executing anyone even rumoured to claim rights they don't have. And finally, Palonite Companions are the elite bodyguards of the Imperial House itself. Armoured in the finest Palonite war gear and armed with extremely rare Archaeotech weaponry, companion delegations are dispatched down Hive to either apprehend or keep someone safe that the Imperial House has designs upon. In-game, Palonite Enforcers are a playable gang with a lot of different options, and Justicars and Companions are both allied factions. But who are these noble forces of the law seeking to apprehend? Well, outlaws, of course. Any regular gang can be deemed outlaw, but apart from common criminals, the Underhive also hosts heretical and decadent cults and various escapees from their place in Hive City. Criminals, all of them, who are hunted down by the law. We've already spoken about the Redemptionists who hide out in corridor gangs, but there are far worse down Hive. The corruption of chaos is of course rife in 40k, and it's no different on Necromunda. Amongst the workers and serfs of Hive City, rebellion and resentment breeds easily, and many work gangs and industrial lodges have been known to fall to the dark powers. While reprisal is usually swift and brutal, some of these helot cults manage to escape Hive City and head down Hive, where they can continue to prey to their patrons in secret. Helot cults are usually driven into the deepest, darkest places in the Underhive, constantly on the run from not only the law, but also right-thinking Underhivers and zealous redemptionist crusades, driven into cursed zones and polluted areas. One industry that is particularly rife with cult activity is the corpse starch business. To feed its populace, Necromunda recycles the dead into a number of food products, collectively known as corpse starch. On some worlds, that's only ever used as a last resort, but on Necromunda, it's a grim necessity. An industry that's controlled by the Corpse Guild, but the horror of the job often causes those forced to work in the massive corpse grinders to lose touch with reality, feasting on the dead flesh itself rather than the final product. These work crews inevitably devolve into cults, usually dedicating themselves to some aspect of the blood god Khorne, and are liable to rise up in great bloody rebellions led by master butchers and harvest lords, and wielding the grim tools of their trade on the unsuspecting population of Hive City in search of fresh meat. Just like Helot cults, corpse grinder cults are ruthlessly prosecuted by the enforcers, and any hint of their presence covered up in the aftermath, though a few do manage to escape, either into the depths of the Hive or out into the wastes to continue hunting for food. And of course, chaos is not the only issue here. Gene stealers have attempted to infiltrate Necromunda many times, the most recent time being the subversion and eventual fall of Hive Secundus, which now stands as a ruin protected by military cordon. However, the radiation released by the destruction of the Hive, combined with some ill-advised genetic tampering on the original subjects, had a marked effect on the gene stealers present, devolving them into twisted malstrain. The gene stealers of Secundus still send out their cults to infiltrate the hives of the planet. They have a particular habit of infecting the isolated mining clans who dot the ash wastes, but unlike regular gene stealer cults, their psychic call is so twisted that the wider Tyrannid species actively avoid the planet. This doesn't stop other gene stealer strains from affecting the planet too. They usually arrive by interstellar trade, but these pure strains are hunted down by not only the regular authorities, but also the Necromunda mal strains. And while gene stealers are of course a massive problem for any planet, the presence of the mal strain does mean Necromunda is unlikely to ever see a Tyrannid invasion. So, I guess that's good, right? Helot Chaos cults, corpse grinder cults, and both regular and malstrain gene stealer cults are all playable gangs in Necromunda. But it's not just mysterious cults that are on the run. Some have escaped just for freedom. Necromunda makes use of hundreds of thousands of enslaved Ogryns, toiling away in the mines, foundries and factories. House Goliath in particular makes great use of them, and they're a common sight in their fighting pits. But this taste of fame and freedom, this sense of individualism, often leads the Ogryns of the pits to revolt. Many slave Ogryn gangs roam the bad zones and wastelands of the Hive, usually formed from small groups of Ogryn pit fighters, equipped with savage cybernetic weaponry like rock drills and buzzsaws. Other Ogryns might be even more heavily modified. Brain-obedient Neo-Sapien cybernetic exo-workers, or bonces, are so heavily augmented that they're basically servitors, liberated by their more free-thinking brethren. Once a slave Ogryn gang has escaped confinement, they can be surprisingly hard to bring to justice. Few people are willing to risk confronting one to claim the bounty, and these renegades often find employment as mercenaries and guards in remote underhive settlements. Slave Ogryns are another playable gang. And of course, existing beneath the law are a number of criminal enterprises. Rogue Factoria make counterfeit weapons, cold traders smuggle Xenos artifacts and off-world curios into the planet, narco-lords control the black market in chems and drugs, and Psi Syndica traffic rogue psychers into the service of anyone who can pay. In playability terms, most of these are alliances, but ones that don't come with any extra models, they just give extra rules. Though smuggler shore parties and Factoria work gangs are both delegations that can accompany a gang on missions if you convert them. Holding the various strands of Hive society together are the Merchants Guild, the connections through which all trade flows in the Hives, from the city to the depths of the Underhive, laying claim to the spaces left between the manufacturing industries of the houses and the off-world high commerce of the nobles. Granted charters by Lord Helmawr, the various guilds control the flow of power, water, coin and flesh as it moves around the planet, regulating everything from the operation of its mines to the provision of light. And gangs can often find employment protecting their various delegations. The Prometheum Guild, the Mercator's Pyros, and the Electro Guild, the Mercator's Lux, control the supply of power in the Hive, from the energies siphoned from the Hive's great heat sinks to the seams of Promethium burned for fuel. Their pyromantic conclaves travel the length and breadth of the Underhive, supplying power and energy to the settlements and burning alive any who would steal it. The Mercator Gelt, the Guild of Coin, controls the roads, tunnels and gates of Necromunda, extracting tolls for passage. One of the more widely seen of the guilders, their toll collectors are common in the Underhive, making sure the Imperial House gets its cut of any new expeditions and claims. Their Masters of Coin carry their keys of office and are accompanied by groups of grovelling debtors indentured into their service. The Mercator Palladus, the Guild of Corpses, who we mentioned earlier, are central to the survival of the planet. The guild trades in dead flesh, sending out corpse harvesting parties to find rich sources of meat to be turned into the next batch of corpse starch by the corpse grinders. Their pale consorts and bone scriveners can be found across the Hive, often seen in the aftermath of gang fights or in dead settlements, examining the quality of their prospective goods. The Guild of Water is another vital element of the society, controlling the cisterns, the pipes, and the general supply of clean-ish water across the parched planet. The Guild sends out Nautican siphoning delegations across the Hive to maintain and assess any current siphons and reservoirs, and to search for new sources of water, including the handy walking bags of fluids that populate the Hive. Similarly to that, the Mercator Sanguis are the Guild of Slavers, those who procure human product, both for the industries of the Hive and the entertainment of its masses. The Chain Lords of the Guild deal in human flesh, sealing the fates of thousands with a single stamp. Slaver entourages are common sights across the Underhive, dragging lines of hivers to market, guarded by brutally augmented pit slaves. Many other guilds exist, such as the Iron Guild and the Air Guild, but those are the main ones that are playable with actual models in the game. All of them are taken as allies. If the Merchant Guild requires a stronger show of force, well, they have the coin to hire people to get the job done. Outside the simple requirements of the Pax Helmawr, Necromunda has a massive population of bounty hunters who hunt down transgressors against, well, whoever's got money, really. Bounty hunters might be ex-gangers or members of long-established hunter schools and families, and often work on their own, but it's not uncommon for groups of bounty hunters to band together to go after larger targets, or be organised by the guild themselves, given guild tokens and designated intimidated abjurators or shacklemen, depending on their task. These Venator gangs are incredibly diverse, formed of necromundans and off-worlders alike, bands of veteran killers plying their trade across the Hive. Venators are another playable gang. Finally, beyond the clan houses and the noble houses and the commerce of the planet, there are those who simply live their lives outside the Hives, the Outlanders, whose home is the Ash Waste themselves. The great equatorial oceans of Necromunda have been home to the Ash Waste nomads since time immemorial. To the average Hiver, the nomads are terrifying apparitions, as alien as any Xenos, yet by all accounts they are human in origin, humans who have adapted to the harsh wasteland of the planet. They cover themselves in dark cloaks against the polluted environment, their faces never seen, and worship the great spirits of the planet, herding the native Helmawr insect beasts for food and transport. There are many myths and legends about where they originated. Some claim them to predate the old Arrhenius continuity, to be the original human inhabitants of the world. Others say they're the people of that continuity, cast out when the Imperium took control. Others link them to a rogue offshoot of one of the noble houses, frequently House Catalus. Wherever they came from, they're the scourge of the wastelands, appearing from ash storms without warning. War parties or even whole tribes of nomads attack caravans and mining outposts, even sometimes infiltrating into the Hives themselves. And the Wastes are also home to their rivals, the Ironhead Squats. The Squats of Necromunda have been present for millennia, originally descended from a Votan kin band that made a deal with the planetary government in the earliest days, trading their knowledge of rebuilding the Hives for mining claims in the Ash Wastes. Adapting over the millennia, the Squats controlled the underways of the planet, the vast highways that cross the world underground, their holdfasts and fortresses extracting tolls on any that wish to use them. Squat prospecting expeditions venture deep into the wastes, mining the chemical and mineral wealth of the planet for either their own use or for trade with the Hives, which is usually the only time they have anything to do with them. The Squats still retain much of their ancient, advanced Votan technology and jealously guard their claims, something that brings them into conflict with both the humans of the Hive and the nomads of the Waste, but they are a far larger and more powerful faction than either of those groups suspect. Both Ash Waste nomads and Ironhead Squats are playable and very expandable gangs. And finally, Necromunda is a world of teeming trillions, and many fall through the gaps. Collectively known as Outcasts, this population comprises the clanless, those families born outside the strictures of the clan houses, maybe the descendants of escaped helots, the Hive scummers that loiter around the settlements of the Underhive, working as muscle for the gangs, criminals who've been exiled from Hive society for their crimes, and those who have been shunned because of what they are. Weirds, rogue psychers are commonly found banding together on the run from the law. Outcasts might even be the descendants of noble delegations, fallen houses or branches of a house, or even rogue elements cast out of the various merchant guilds. Outcasts make their living in any way they can, from providing niche and unregulated services and goods to good old-fashioned robbery and murder, and are a playable and very flexible gang faction. They can even be a way of turning some of those alliance factions into the core of a playable gang. Of course, there are a million other factions active on the planet. Ratskins hole out in the Underhives, their tribes worshipping the spirit of the Hive and hunting the giant rats that live down there. Whole tribes of hideous and twisted scavies populate the darkest zones near the sump, their ranks bolstered by zombies and mutants. And who knows what else lurks out there in the wastes. But for now, none of those are actually playable as gangs, so they don't count. That should be a reasonably complete guide to the many factions vying for control of some random area of the Underhive. As I said at the start, the planet has been explored in far more detail than any other world in this setting, and its economy, its culture, and its origins have been built out in a way few other worlds have been. The game operates at the level of smugglers, criminals, and outcasts in skirmishes between gangs rather than giant battles, and so the lore is able to be written in a way that's far more personal than in other games. And that leads to lots of interesting factions to play, from simple house gangs on their way down from the city to criminal enterprises to weird conglomerations of outcasts and renegades. All things that would be way too small to be a military faction in 40k proper, but are perfect for the scale of the Underhive. So pick your allegiance as best you can, be careful with your alliances, and until next cycle, thanks for watching. And if you'd like another video about the world of Necromunda, there's loads of videos on my channel, so maybe one will pop up to the right there, maybe it's something else. And if you'd like to support the channel, well, all the usual things exist. They're all detailed in the thing below. See ya.